The Shephelah means lowlands, and it's a portion of land located in the southeast of Israel between the coastal plain of the Mediterranean Sea and the hill country of the Judean Hills and the Dead Sea. The Shephelah is roughly 45 kilometres long and 10 kilometres wide and forms natural valleys and hills to drain the creeks and the rivers into the sea. Today the Shephelah is largely rural with many farms, but the cities of Ashdod, Ashkelon, Bet Shemesh and Kirkjat still exist around it to this day. The hill areas are not particularly suitable for anything but pastures for animals like sheep and goats. But the valley plains offer fertile lands for vineyards and various agricultural crops. The book of Joshua records that the land in the Shephelah was assigned to the tribes of Judah and Dan as a part of their inheritance, as promised to Abraham. The Shephelah is mentioned many times in the Bible, but not necessarily as the Shephelah. It's mentioned as a valley where a significant event takes place. In the King James Version, the Hebrew term Shephelah tends to be translated as a vale or a valley. In the Old Testament, the area acted as a gateway into central Israel via some of the more notable valleys, in particular the three valleys that we want to consider in this video. The three specific valleys that we want to briefly look at are the Ajalon Valley, the Sorek Valley, and the Elah Valley. All of these acted as natural routes or access valleys to the Mediterranean Sea, into central Israel, and in particular to Jerusalem, Israel's capital. This made the defense of these valleys of vital importance to Israel during their times of occupation of the land, from the time of Joshua through to the times of David until Babylon's invasion in 585 BC. During this time, several stunning events took place in each of these valleys that are now part of biblical folklore, and they are still among the most treasured and favoured Bible stories, particularly for children to this day. Ajalon, for example, is mentioned 10 times in the Bible, and on every occasion it's in the Old Testament in Joshua, Judges, Samuel and Chronicles. And it's first mentioned in Joshua 10 and verse 12 after Joshua and his fighting men had ran all night from their base camp in Gilgal to Gibeon to save them from the invading Amorites from central and southern Israel. Upon arriving at Gibeon, they went straight into battle and fought the Amorites and the Canaanites all the way from Gibeon to Upper Bethoron. And the fighting was hard and fierce, but God was with Joshua and the men of Israel. So much so that Joshua graphically describes the battle scene as first the Amorites rushed down the hillside from Upper to Lower Bethoron, with the Israelites chasing hard behind them into the valley of Ajalon. And imagine this scene as you run for your life down this hill with the enemy hard pressed behind you. And as if it's not hard enough to run with your weapons in your hands, looking over your shoulder, ready to defend yourself against the enemy closing in behind, but then you are confronted with a steep hill where you have to try and keep your feet and keep your balance, with the Israelites right behind you, closing in. And if that's not hard enough, God starts sending down great hailstones. A storm hits, and it rains hailstones upon them. And imagine slipping and sliding and trying to dodge all these hailstones that are killing all your fellow soldiers. And one after one, they drop beside you. These weren't just your ordinary big hailstones. These were huge hailstones, and they were killing everybody. Well, not everybody. Everybody on your side was being killed, but not one hailstone was touching the children of Israel. And Joshua 10 says, more Canaanites died by the great hailstones than by the sword. That's an incredible thing, and they chased them right into the valley of Ajalon. But there was still a problem. The problem was that there were still thousands of Amorites and Canaanites on the run. And if they got away under the cover of darkness, they could regroup and come back and destroy Israel. Joshua needed more time, but this day was nearly gone, and the sunset was approaching. What could he do? There was only one thing to do. There was only one thing he could do. Pray. pray to God for help. And Joshua 10:12 says, Then Joshua spoke to the Lord, and he said in the sight of Israel, Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon. Sun, stand still. And moon, stand still. Stop. Sun, don't set. Don't go down. And Joshua 10:13 says, So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the people had revenged their enemy. So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day. How incredible is that? For almost a whole day, the sun stayed up. And that happened right here in this valley of Ajalon. Another thing that happened here is from the New Testament. And although the name Ajalon is not mentioned, a village in the valley of Ajalon is named. And that village is the village of Emmaus. And Emmaus is about 10 kilometres from Jerusalem. And it was here on the road to Emmaus, through the valley of Ajalon, that Jesus met up with two believers and walked and talked with them shortly after his resurrection. And they didn't know it was Jesus. And when they arrived at Emmaus and their destination, they invited Jesus to stay with them and join them for a meal, still not knowing it was Jesus. And as Jesus broke bread with them, their eyes, their spiritual eyes, were suddenly opened. And they suddenly realized that they'd been walking and talking with Jesus. And it says that their hearts burned within them. All this happened in this incredible valley, in this valley of Ajalon. Well, the next valley is the valley of Sorek. And it's the home and the playground of Samson, that famous Bible character known for his great strength. The valley of Sorek runs parallel to the valley of Ajalon. And the valley of Sorek and the city and the valley are only mentioned 8 times in the Bible. And 6 of those 8 times is in relation to the story of Samson. So virtually the entire Bible reference to this place all revolve around the story of Samson. His actions, his deeds, his obedience, his faith, and his mistakes. So it was here in this valley that Samson grew up as a devout young Nazirite Jew. The vow of a Nazirite involved these 3 things: abstinence from wine and strong drink, refraining from the cutting of the head during the period of your vow, and the avoidance of contact with the dead. This valley of Sorek, like the other valleys, is a very fertile valley to this very day. In Judges 15 verses 4 to 5 we read, Then Samson went and caught 300 foxes, and he took torches, turned the fox's tail to tail, and put a torch between each pair of the tails. And when he had set the torches on fire, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines, and burnt up both the stocks and the standing grain, as well as the vineyards and the olive groves. So this valley was a very fertile valley in producing corn and grapes and olives. And it was here in this valley of Sorek he fought and killed the lion, and he broke his Nazirite vow not to touch anything that was dead. It was also in this valley of Sorek that Samson met Delilah. And it was here that the Philistines captured him after Delilah cut his hair, causing Samson to break another of his Nazirite vows. And ironically, it was here that he was taken from the land of Israel to Gaza as a prisoner, as a trophy, as a captive, where he was dragged and displayed before the Philistine people before his death inside the walls of Gaza, and then buried back in his home village. And the third valley is the valley of Elah. The valley of Elah is probably the most well-known or famous of all 3 of these valleys because of the battle of David and Goliath that took place here. Yet, for all its fame, it's only mentioned 3 times in the Bible, all in 1 Samuel, and always as the valley of Elah. Again, this valley, like Ajalon and Sorek, is a very fertile valley still to this day. Today, vineyards flourish in this valley, as do olive trees and crops of various kinds. But 3,000 years ago, this valley was a battlefield, and soon the blood of thousands of Philistines would run and soak its fertile soil. And it's from this ancient fortress encampment called Kirbeth Quafa that David first approached the battlefront at the Valley of Elah. The Valley of Elah was a strategic piece of land that held the key to access to central Israel and the mountains of Israel, from which control of all Israel could be gained. With the Israeli army entrenched on one side of the Valley of Elah and the Philistines entrenched on the other side of the valley between Sokoth and Ezekiah, the battle was a stalemate until the Philistine giant entered the scene. The Philistines were an island people from the Aegean Sea and the Greek island areas, most likely from the Isle of Crete. They were not Canaanites or even originally from the Middle East area. They came to this island to conquer and to plunder and had already set up a foothold in the area that we know today as the Gaza Strip. And now they had their focus on capturing the whole land of Israel, starting with the Valley of Elah and then moving swiftly up this valley into central Israel and onto Jerusalem. And so it's here, right in this valley of Elah, with the children of Israel right across the top ridges, and the Philistines over on this ridge over here. And as David comes down from the mountaintop, after hearing the cries of Goliath for a challenger, that David comes down, he takes the stones out of the brook, and he enters into this flat plain, this flat valley, that opens up the whole way to the area of Bethlehem and Jerusalem if it was to fall. And so David gathers his stones and he meets Goliath in this valley. And of course, the consequences are that the God of Israel is with David. The God of Israel is with David, and he guides that stone. He guides that stone into the forehead of Goliath, and it's here that Goliath falls. With the battle won and the region secured under Israel's control, the legendary stories of these three valleys could now be told and even embellished over and over again to the children and the grandchildren that would follow. May God bless you. May God keep you. Amen.